All right, we're going to pick up our second video here on risk management and liability when it comes to going out and doing your internships. And so just finished up talking about some of the ways to prevent some of those issues from arising that oftentimes come up uh, where people were found or lawsuits did arise. Here's a good example. This is Kaufman versus Garrett, Supreme Court versus Virginia in 2003. Kaufman was at the time a 13-year-old student athlete. He was tackled by a coach during a tackling demonstration at football practice. Kaufman was taken to the ground and his arm was broken. Kaufman sued the school and coach for negligence, assault, and battery. Kaufman alleged that the coaches had never used physical demonstrations before. He didn't assume a risk of being tackled by coaches, only by his peers, and that proper instruction as to what was coming was not given. And Garnett, the coach, and the school were found liable because of that proper communication and instruction, as well as going outside what the expectations were and training was. So this individual at the time was found liable for that particular situation. So liability of employees. Okay, so one big part of the thing that you'll do is supervision. Okay, whether you're supervising employees, whether you're supervising participants, probably as an intern you'll come out and doing it as a supervision of participants. But one of the duties that you require or that you owe when it comes to supervision is planning and having a plan in place for what you're going to do and how you're going to go about doing it. A lot of times goals and objectives. We talk about goals and objectives in leadership. Why are they important? Well, starting with your goals and objectives, you can start planning what you're going to do and how you're going to reach those goals and objectives, and whether it's drills or activities you're doing to help teach those elements. It comes back to helping you plan and making sure that you have the proper equipment and making sure that you have the proper facilities, all that for those type of activities. A lot of times people, when they get themselves in trouble with that planning, it's because they didn't plan or they do something at the spur of the moment, and it comes back to bite them in the rear because somebody gets hurt based upon that lack of planning. Instruction, giving instruction and give quality instruction and going over the directions and the rules and guidelines. Warning of known risks. Again, in leadership, when we created our activity plans, one of the things we had you put in there was safety and elements of safety and talking about the risks that exist and making people aware of those risks so that they avoid them or can make sound decisions about how to handle those. Providing it in a safe environment, not only physical safety but emotional and mental safety. And we want to make sure that we provide that safe environment for the participant, and the environment's made for the activity that you're doing. Evaluating physical and mental side of it, making sure that people are okay, keeping up with the physical aspects of the activity as well as the mental aspects. Sometimes as a supervisor, sometimes as a leader, you'll see that people just can't keep up physically. So you might have to make adjustments based upon their needs, as well as mentally. Sometimes the frustration of not being able to do something is quite overwhelming, or the again, the mental aspect or emotional aspect when others are not so open and understanding with participants. And then emergency care, making sure that you know what the steps are, the procedures to how to get emergency care for those participants. All 6 duties that you have to make sure that you owe those anybody that's within your supervision. Liability of administration. Again, administration comes back to making sure they can exercise reasonable care to prevent reasonably foreseeable risk and to foresee dangerous conditions, and make foreseeable dangerous conditions safe by repairing or warning. Again, you want to make sure that one example had when I was working in summer playground programs, we were doing our checks of facilities and equipment, and we came across a slide that was actually damaged overnight, and we had to shut the slide down because it was no longer safe for participants to participate on it. We made the administration, our supervisors, aware of it, so they could take steps to make sure that nobody was on that and nobody would get hurt. Again, administration wants to make sure they provide supervision of their athletic activities and make sure they hire qualified personnel. Again, it's sometimes challenging to find qualified personnel because, background check, trainings, and able to interact in a proper manner with the participants and being able to teach the skills or activities that they're working with. So that can be a challenge, but you have to do it. You have to go through those steps and making sure. Even volunteers now have to have background checks to make sure and training to make sure that they're qualified. Vicarious liability. This is interesting. As an administrator, you may be sued based upon the actions of employees. So if your employee does something wrong, you could be sued because you didn't do the proper steps to train them and supervise them. Liability of the corporate entity. Again, going back to that vicarious liability. Acts outside the realm of employment, you can and will be held responsible for acts outside the scope of your employment that result in harm, such as driving a participant in your personal car and getting in an accident. Again, that's a big no-no nowadays. Going outside your training or scope of employment, and I cringe back in the day. When I was coaching middle school baseball. There was one student that didn't have a ride home from baseball practice, and I ended up driving him home every night. Well, something would have happened, while I was doing something nice and I didn't need to do that. Something would have happened to him. I could have been found liable and the school could have been found liable because I was driving him home. So it's just something. I know it pains you sometimes, and the law's not necessarily set up for doing nice things for people, but you're just putting yourself in a situation where if something goes wrong, your employer can't protect you because of this, because it's something outside your job. You're on your own, and that's not a good thing. And this also comes back to those volunteers, trainees, interns. You as an intern, you can be individually liable, but then you can also make the corporation liable because of something you do. We had an intern a couple of years ago. One of the first years I was here, actually not a couple of years anymore, but was working with aquatics, and he was after swim practice, he was horsing around, horseplaying with one of the participants on the pool deck. He and the participant both slipped and went down, and the participant broke his leg. And even to make the story better, the participant's father was a lawyer, so that doesn't bode well. So it didn't turn out too well for both the individual and the city that was responsible for that intern. So got to be very careful, got to follow, you want to have fun and you want to do but you got to do it the right way, and you got to keep in mind the consequences of sometimes that behavior that goes outside your training. So that vicarious liability, It's a legal doctrine that imposes responsibility for the person, for one person failure on with whom the person has a special relationship. So that your boss, your supervisor, the agency can all be, again, made accountable and responsible because of your actions. And that's what this is saying. So knowledge. Remember how a word in legal context may have different meaning in general context. So this is true with knowledge. Knowledge means knew or should have known. Actual knowledge is you know. Constructive knowledge is you should have known. That you should have known better. Okay, and that can apply in the legal standpoint. And why is this important for support manager, administrator? Supervision, oversight of people below you is vital. You need to inspect, search for risk, dangers, and inform yourself of things you should have noticed. Okay, so you've got to be aware that there's actual knowledge and constructive knowledge. And constructive knowledge is making you should have known. You should have gone through and doing these steps. Okay. Administrators, coaches, activity leaders should consider the following to help reduce lawsuits. Be aware of safety issues. Be careful of punishment. If you're giving people punishment, be careful what that punishment is. The administrators need to know the activities of the coaches. And that when I was working in the summer camps, I had to give my activity plan to my administrator every week. So. And for every day, so they knew exactly what we were doing, so they had a good idea. Again, didn't want to go spur of the moment. Weekly meetings, submit activity, practice plans, showing up and being there as an administrator, but also communicating is key. So we talked about, you talk about the 4 methods of how to treat risk: avoidance, or just stopping it, or elimination; reduction is being proactive and finding ways to minimize it, right? We can retain it and just kind of go along with what it is and accept that this is going to probably be a potential, or we can transfer it. We can give it to somebody else. We can sign an agreement with a lot of times other agencies, and they take on the responsibility of that, or insurance. Okay. Can your words make you negligent? Yes. If your words or actions induce reliance upon them and it caused an unreasonable and unforeseeable risk. Instruction demonstrations always must be clear. Also follow through with your words. Here's an example of one where the school had security guards on duty in the parking lot in the evening, but one evening the security guard wasn't there. A new teacher, relying on that security guard, entered the parking lot alone. She was attacked, even if having a guard wasn't necessary or would have prevented the attack. By saying there would be one there and failing to have one, this makes you liable for the situation and negligent. All right, so let's think. Finishing up here. Kind of rushed through it, but it should be review and is it your legal duty to keep people safe? No. Why is the answer no? The duty is not to keep people safe. It's to act as reasonable, prudent people would. You can't always keep people safe. Injuries and accidents are going to happen. In our field, they are going to happen. People are going to get hurt. Okay? So you're not automatically negligent if someone gets hurt on your premises or under your supervision. Your duty is to act reasonable and prudent to prevent the injuries. Did you have a plan? Were the facilities checked for safety? And was the equipment good? All that will help protect you in these circumstances, and keeping records of those things will help you. Prudent equals foresight, care, and thought for the future. All right. So, and if you fail to uphold your legal duty, then you're negligent. Okay. So hopefully, again, not meaning to scare you, but I want you to be thinking about this as you go out there and start internships, and is keeping yourself protected against negligence. All right. I'll stop it here. Hope you learned a little bit.